I don't even know where to start from all of the things that have been said that are just wrong.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. John, is today the 18th?
Today is the 18th of September, Brad.
Wow, that is the voice of John Combest, Combest. You spell his name because of the fact you need to type it into your computer to check out johncombest.com. I am Brad Hildebrand, an American. John Combest is a conservative Republican, just to get your...
Whoa. We established yesterday that I am a Chinese communist, Brad.
You're a Chinese communist.
I'm currently rolling in my Ho Chi Minh tank. I wouldn't be breaking any laws in China, though, by talking on my cellular communication device while driving, because I wouldn't be allowed to have a cellular communication device.
But you don't have one of those interesting names like the Chinese communist spies that come and shack up with American representatives. You don't have any like Wang Wang or what was her name, Fang Fang or something like that?
Hey, listen, Eric, I'm not going to talk about that on the air.
Okay, that is John Combest. As you can tell, we have fun with this show, and that's what it should be about. Yeah, we talk about serious stuff, but we try to have lighthearted moments, and we don't try to beat you over the head with this. We try to entertain you and inform you, because that's what John does every single day. What a segue, John, right? Every single day of his life for the past, 38 years? Is that what it is now? 38 years now?
204 years, Brad. I'm nearly 2.5 times as old as you.
He was chronicling stories that George Washington was sending him via courier, Pony Express or something like that. Anyway, every single day for the past 23 years, John puts together this list of all these important stories you should go to. Nothing fancy on his website. If you go to johncombest.com, don't expect to see all sorts of highfalutin HTML5 banners like you see on my sites, or all sorts of nice videos like you see in my sites. You just see dull, boring print. But behind that...
hold on, Brad. The worst thing about my site is it's updated every day. With the joy is you can go to a Brad Hildebrand website and it'll be updated for 2 weeks, and then he'll just leave the lorem ipsum up there for a few more years, right?
John, as you can tell, John is very complimentary of me and never says anything bad about me. Anyway, he does this website, and you could sort of portray it as the old Drudge Report of Missouri. The new Drudge Report kind of sucks, I think. I don't think too many people go do it anymore. But anyway, all this information there, you click on the links, and he takes you to the story of what you should know going on in the state of Missouri. Sometimes dozens, sometimes literally 40, 50 different items. But what we do is we bring in this guy right here.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And we count down the top 3 according to John Combest. And we start with...
In third place...
In the spirit of always being complimentary toward Brad Hildebrand, we will start with a story which taps into your unique expertise and, in fact, your unique interests, Brad. And, in fact, as if that wasn't enough, a story that you brought to my attention last week that I hadn't even read about. I just skimmed the headline, but you smartened me up to it, Brad. Last week, you informed me that St. Louis City was going to put a ban on data centers. You remember smarting me up about this last week, Brad?
I did.
And not only did you smarten me up about it, but it reminded us all of the fact that St. Charles County, or was it the city? Was it the city or the county, Brad, that was going to do the data center ban?
St. Charles City.
St. Charles City, you're right. Okay, thank you for that. St. Charles City had announced that they were going forward with a ban on data centers. And Brad, last week you cited news coverage that said that St. Louis City was considering doing much the same thing. Well, according to St. Louis Public Radio, today, St. Louis City Alderwoman Ann Schweitzer, she is from the 1st Ward in St. Louis City, and she has, it looks like, Brad, essentially brokered a deal in which St. Louis City will not indeed ban data centers, but they will have a brand new process of review. So in other words, they're going to take every data center on a case-by-case basis. Now, what's noteworthy, if you dig a little bit deeper into the story, is that previous to Ms. Schweitzer's recommendation, there was no requirement that any governing board have a public hearing about the data center before the data center was approved. You heard that right. Somebody could just get a data center built, propose a data center, go to a governing board like the Board of Aldermen, and get it approved and then build that data center. But thanks to Ann Schweitzer, there will be a requirement of public input and public hearings before any data center is built. So, Brad, this would appear to be one of those rare cases, in my opinion, in which St. Louis City is acting with a little bit more, should we say, moderation than St. Charles City is.
All right. See, once again, I don't quite understand this whole thing because are you familiar with the buildings right there in North County at the corner of Lindbergh and McDonald, which they call the Blue Zoo? You know what I'm talking about?
I am not familiar with that, no.
This was a data center built back in the day, and this goes back to the old days of McDonnell Douglas. When I was in high school, John, McDonnell Douglas supplied our computer, whatever you call it, computer time or whatever like that for high school, and we actually had a dial-up connection into McDonnell Douglas's computer system, which was housed right there at the corner of Lindbergh and McDonald. And matter of fact, at the time, it was a world-renowned building because of the fact the way it was designed, and they've since retrofitted it into offices. That's what they call it, the Blue Zoo, because it's blue and it sort of looks sort of weird. But anyway, it was designed to house all these computer systems, these mainframes back in the day. And they had flow-through ventilation. That was the important aspect of it, that in the summer they had special air conditioning units. But in the winter, the building heated itself by the computers. And this was like world-renowned. Everybody, oh, my God, it's so great. It's so wonderful. Okay, why can't we look at data centers like that anymore? Why do we have to go, we can't have a data center. It's terrible. Once upon a time.
Well, I think there's a big difference there, Brad, in the example you give. And amazingly, you hadn't shared that story on the air before, so congratulations. I think that the difference is McDonnell Douglas was a revered company in your era when it existed. And today, the folks that are attempting to build these are things like Google and Meta. And some folks, when they hear the name Google and Meta, or they hear the name Amazon, they think big bad corporation equals evil equals must oppose. That's the difference.
I don't get it. You travel around the country. I don't travel that much, but I travel around the country from time to time. And I see some of these other cities, and I think to myself, okay, why can't St. Louis be like this? I just don't get it. And and I think to a certain extent, what you brought up last week, you complimented me where you had the story about the dude in Kansas City who came out with the cave designation.
Sly James, the former mayor of Kansas City.
Right. I don't get it, John. It's very frustrating. And by the way, you stole one of my top three. So I
know I did. I can't wait I'm thinking, now the good thing is, Brad, you only, for Brad's top three, you never pull stories from the Post-Dispatch. So last night I was thinking, I got to get my counterpoint ready for Brad because he's going to he's going to beat a dead horse from 2024. But then I realized that you don't read the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and you never include stories from the Post-Dispatch in your top three.
John?
So I didn't even pull that quote.
On my phone right now, I have the St. Louis Post-Dispatch up, so don't say I don't read it.
Wow, well, you never cite it in Brad's top three. You know what you will cite, though? Story number one. We're not there yet. Let's do story number two.
In third place.
Oh, hold it. I hit the wrong button. Okay, here we go.
Up a notch to number two.
So, Brad, speaking of jobs, you were talking about McDonnell Douglas and what a huge employer that is. In the state of Missouri, from August 2024 to August 2025, 34,000 new jobs were created. That's a big growth, Brad. You say, John, cool story, bro, but can you break the numbers down a little bit more? Absolutely. Brad, where do you think the biggest gains in Missouri's workforce came from? What do you think they were? Name maybe a sector or two.
Oh, John, that's easy. The cannabis industry. I mean, they've created tens of thousands of jobs. All those people, farming that stuff and stuff like that.
Yeah.
and the marketing people.
The bud tenders.
Right,
bruh.
the bud tenders. You got it. That's
Well, yeah, Brad, you might not be too far off because one of the top categories was health services. So I guess you could consider cannabis. It's medicine, bro. It's from the earth. But I'll break it down real quick. The largest gains were in private education and health services. That was about 20,000 jobs, 19,600 to be specific. Now, Brad, I'm guessing that private education would include private schools, maybe religious schools, maybe some new schools that are popping up, or I guess private education. Maybe would that include private higher education as well, like a Wash U?
I guess, and probably like Lindenwood and places like that as well.
Yeah, that's a great example. So like a private college like that. The second biggest, the area with the second largest amount of gains were leisure and hospitality. And then after that, you get down a little bit further and it's like mining, logging, and construction. Now the biggest losses, Brad, are in the very non-specific category called, quote, professional and business services. Lost 7,300 jobs. The number that jumped out to me, and I think you'll be most interested in, and our listeners, is that government employment increased by 10,700 jobs over the year, with increases in local and state and a decrease in federal government. So you think about it, Brad. Federal jobs in Missouri decreased by 2,100, but 9,600 jobs new in local government. So I'm guessing the way this is quantified is maybe it would be inaccurate to say new jobs. Maybe they were jobs that were left unfilled at the beginning of August 2024 and they just got filled sometime in the last year. But Brad, that's a huge number. 9,600 local government jobs increase and state jobs, 3,200 folks newly in these state jobs. Isn't that nuts, Brad? That's a ton of government employees.
John, I will agree with you 100%. And just take St. Charles County, just from the edifices, and I'm going to get myself in trouble. We have Dan Borgmeyer, who campaigned for his new fancy schmancy new city hall in St. Charles, which is going to be this new fancy schmancy place. You've got the Taj Mahal out there in St. Peter's, Len Pagano. Don't be mad at me, but your building's way too big and way too fancy. Nick Guccione, don't be mad at me, Nick, but you got your fancy schmancy building out there in Wentzville. Even the place in Cottleville, which is a little tiny town, which has a great big monstrous building. What do we need all those buildings and people for? Come on, knock it off.
I think that, your example there of like Cottleville is a good example because that's just schmancy. The other three that you cited were fancy schmancy, according to you.
Right.
But sometimes you just need schmancy. You don't need fancy schmancy.
See, I think Cottleville was better served when they had a couple double wides, which they did for a long time. Matter of fact, I could tell the story that when my son almost got arrested and I had to go to a police interrogation of my oldest son, we went to a double wide right there off of Motherhead Road or something like that. I don't know. It was a double. It's the water company is there now. Of course, the water company where you can't pay your bill anymore, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, Brad, come on. Now listen, if you really have a problem with it, you should bring it up at the next Cottleville Weldon Spring Chamber of Commerce meeting.
Yeah, they don't talk about stuff like that. Okay, are we ready for number one?
Blow my eardrums out, Brad.
The number one.
A little bit of conflict in a story, but you have to dig deep, Brad. You have to go to a place like, I don't know, johncombest.com to actually see the juxtaposition in messages. We've seen headlines over the last few days from local media about whether or not Donald Trump would be calling for the National Guard to come to St. Louis. Well, he did mention it, but would it really happen? Mark Schlinkman of the Post-Dispatch has a story up today, to which you can find a paywall-free version on my site. The headline, no plans, quote, presently, to send National Guard troops to St. Louis, governor says. Mike Kehoe says, hey, we continue to keep the options open to keep Missourians safe, particularly in St. Louis. Donald Trump says he might even send in the National Guard to a place like St. Louis. So here's the direct quote from Kehoe's office. Governor Kehoe appreciates President Trump's efforts to clean up cities like Washington, D.C. and Memphis, end quote, and shares his goal, quote, of creating safer, more prosperous communities, unquote. That's what Kehoe's office says. Now, Brad, you say, okay, great, John. It sounds like Kehoe's saying, sure, Donald, whatever. We might have folks come in here. But yesterday, Nick Reed down in Springfield, Missouri, KSGF, they're on the radio the exact same time we are, Brad. Good old Nick Reed down there. He had brand new Attorney General Catherine Hanaway on, and they had a fantastic conversation. And before Catherine left, there was an in-studio interview. Nick said, hey, all this stuff about crime and Trump sending the National Guard into St. Louis, what do you think? You think we'll see that down there? You think we'll see that done? And Catherine said, quote, I kind of think we will. Now, how about that, Brad? Catherine going out on a limb and saying, hey, I kind of think we will see the National Guard activated in St. Louis. Now, Catherine knows a lot of folks in federal law enforcement. She's, I say obviously, but for folks who don't know, if you're new to Missouri politics, Catherine's relationships are deep, both in Missouri and Washington, D.C. I would trust Catherine Hanaway's opinion here, Brad. The governor's office has to say all the right things. They have to send out a well-crafted statement that's diplomatic. But I'd listen to Catherine on this. And if she thinks the National Guard's going to be sent in, I'd put my money on Catherine.
Well, Catherine not only was Speaker of the House, 10, 15 years ago or something like that, wasn't she?
Yeah, beginning in the year 2003, yeah.
Right, okay. She was also a federal prosecutor, wasn't that what she was at one point in time?
That's absolutely right, Brad.
So she's got federal ties with that. So are we done with that one, John? Because if
we sure are, Brad.
Okay, I want to go back, and John is so correct about things. He chastised me because I don't bring any stories from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I'm looking at the mobile version of this right now, and you are so correct because of the fact that here's a super important story. The top story on St. Louis Post-Dispatch this morning is at Porchfest in Skinker de Bolivar, front porches become stages. John,
I love that.
I mean, it's almost to the point I'm going like, Is this the Post-Dispatch or is this STLPR.org with at De Bolivar and Skinker? Because of the fact if there were Porchfest in Wentzville, you'd never know about it from St. Louis Public Radio. But if some guy gets on the corner of De Bolivar and Skinker with his coronet and plays a couple notes, St. Louis Public Radio will be, oh my God, he's creating this wonderful music, and isn't it great? We love it, right?
And they would probably look into the fact whether he had anyone in his family, Brad, who identified as a transgender or a non-binary.
No, they would interview the guy and they would go, he's an excellent trumpeter, but his past life leaves a lot to be desired.
That's exactly right.
They would go into this, like the NPR typical story. Here's a very successful business person, but his past life is his mother was a drug addict. His father was a transgendered, cross-dressing ape who identified as an orangutan or something like that, right? Wouldn't that be the story that it says on NPR, right?
And then they jump out and say, hey, if you really want to know someone's background, take their skin tone to Sherwin-Williams. Right. Have them throw their arm up on the counter and ask the nice guy behind the counter, what color am I?
John's referring to the fact that I'm not a white dude. According to, no, this is not Sherwin-Williams, this is Lowe's. According to Lowe's, their paint chip little things, I am not white. I am mocha Java. And the interesting thing about it is there's 3 colors on this color chart chip or whatever you want to call it. And it's perfect for me because most of the time I'm mocha Java, which is the center color. And in the summer when I tan up a little bit, I have to go, it's in the other studio, I have to get it. I go to another level. And in the winter where I don't tan up, I drop down a level. So this one chip has me covered all seasons. It's the all-season skin tone for Brad.
You're a man for all seasons, Brad. What can we say? It's like a song from Grease, too.
Okay, I'm going to have to spend the next 20 minutes rejiggering my top 3 because you took
you're welcome, Brad.
You took one of my top 3. Okay, and my GPS clock is working great because we're supposed to be out of this segment at 7:20. It's 7:22. John, we'll be back, and you're going to
I will, yep.
Okay, John's going to change his clothes.
Yeah, we don't need to include admin stuff for listeners. They
John's
don't care.
John's going to change his
we'll be right back.
clothes and get a new cup of coffee.